Yes, hello everyone. This is our final module around mystical principles, which is one of my most favorite topics because it's somehow the all our studies culminate at the end of the day in something that's essential. And we said that communication, the way how we live everyday life situations, like every little detail of our life can become part of an essential life. And this doesn't mean that we become serious or too strict about things. We can have a lot of fun, and I think we should have a lot of fun. And at the same time, we have like this deepening moment to moment into what's essential. And the mystical principles, we will dive into them after the meditation, are in a way the language. I call this the language of the divine, like how the divine breath exhales the universe. So the breath has certain principles, I believe, and if we know about them, so we can align our life accordingly, and so we will go with the flow of our life. And sometimes if we don't know about them, so we might feel the resistance or the swimming against the flow of the river, and our life might feel a bit harder. And I think it's also interesting that there are some things that we can study, mystical principles that we can study, that actually come from the great traditions that researched this over thousands of years. So we have actually like a real treasure of knowledge that the mystics of all times left for us. And so today we will pick a few and look at them. Some of them we already looked at. And I think it's a beautiful way how to, where the science and the poetry meet, where the science of knowledge and the poetry of the breath of the universe meet in a way. And it's on the one hand metaphorically described, but on the other hand, these are very real energy flows through us that compose us. And I always say, if there is a truth to mystical principles, so that's the making of the composition of what creates this moment. It's the fabric, and out of which all clothes are being tailored. So let's have a look after our meditation, and also when we go now we dive into like the beginning meditation, let's see what are all the treasures that we in a way found already through the time together, the time that we had to practice together, everyone for him or herself, and how the meditative practice actually becomes more and more of a central part of our life. Like as we said, taking a shower became an essential part of a modern life because we know why and what's the benefit. And meditation is in a way like taking a shower for our inner world and having a time to really digest our daily experiences and to deepen our presence. So let's see how far we got in these 9 weeks together. And then we look at some of the principles. So if you want, you can sit back, and if you want, close your eyes and just enjoy the simplicity of sitting here, the simplicity of breathing, and also the blessing of having a moment of free, spacious territory, which means we have a moment to reflect our path, we have a moment to reflect our life, we have a moment of spaciousness to infuse our life with more awareness, more presence. And let's dive into the current body sensations so I can just be aware of my body, the way I'm sitting. And it gives me like an anchor in this current moment. There's an immediacy to my body sensations. There's an intimacy with my body. And the fact that I can watch my body sensations means there has to be something bigger than my body. So whatever is looking and whatever is aware of is a greater space than the body itself. So there's awareness and there's an ocean of sensations, flows, functions in my body. And I can really enjoy the aliveness of energy flowing through my body, of participating in life. I can feel how life flows through me right now. Some areas of my body are more alive, others might be less alive. I can even feel that the more I drop into my body, somehow my mental activity slows down. Because I start collecting my life energy more in my base. I can also include, of course, the closeness of my emotional world to my body sensations. My emotional world is the intermediate station between my physical body and my mental capacity. And I can see how much throughout these 9 weeks I opened myself to the richness of my emotional world. Maybe I was very open already before. I can see if I found more courage to include the emotional components that I usually label as challenging or harder, like shame, fear, maybe anger. And how I allow the whole radius of my emotional capacity to fill my life, to color my life, and to give me the ability to perceive other people directly in their emotional worlds. So my emotional openness gives me an understanding of the emotional worlds of other people. It's like there's a direct communication between the emotional fields, which in simple words means I feel you. I feel connected to you. I know what you feel. I can sense what you feel. And then there is my mental state, and we explored this already. There is my thought process. At the same time, my mind has a certain quality or state that it's in. Sometimes it's very open, curious, creative, sometimes more contracted, dense, more circular patterns of thinking. But at the same time, there is something aware of the activity of my mind. There's a greater awareness that witnesses the state of my mind, the thought process in my mind. And of course, we have external perceptions through our external senses. And at the same time, I am aware of what I'm hearing. I'm aware of what I see, what I feel, taste. So all my senses I can also witness as awareness. So as I become aware of my internal, external perceptions, there's a continuous flow of witnessing, continuous presence, easiness, spaciousness, timelessness. Can even connect for a moment with the whole group again, with our Sangha, everybody who's dialed in right now. I have a subtle sense. Through my intention, I connect in the subtle world to the whole group. There's a mutual intention that connects us. There's a quality of the field, there's an intensifying sensation of the field the more I tune in. And at the same time, there is again, I witness that I have a subtle sensation. I witness my attunement. There's awareness, and there is subtle expansion. Continuous stream of witnessing consciousness every moment of my life. I'm here, I'm available. The original face, I'm here and I'm available. In the simplicity of presence, I'm here and I'm available. Let's rest in the presence of that here-ness and availability. The here-ness of the timelessness and the openness of availability. So for a moment I just focus on here-ness and availability. Witnessing. And from there, let's take a breath and see the beauty of the coexistence of witnessing and sensations, the coexistence of witnessing and body sensations, my content in my mind. Let's start with our exploration of mystical principles. So one of the major mystical principles, like some people say there's Plato, and then all other philosophy is footnotes to it. One of the major principles that we worked with all the time, as you remember in the first module, was the Zen circle, a circle of out of ever-present consciousness, witnessing. One possibility gets born, and one possibility is a universe, is a lifetime, is a situation, a thought. So there is a whole universe that is one possibility at the current moment, and there is one tiny moment within that universe that equals one possibility. And the mystical knowledge describes the process of creation. So from the first moment that God exhales creation in the form of a pure intelligence, a perfect intelligence, the divine mind, Satchitananda, or the supermind of Aurobindo, describes when my mind, my individual mind, merges into Buddha mind, into the great divine mind. Suddenly, there is a total recognition of the perfection. There's a total recognition that I'm not separate. I am, in that moment, I am immersed in that perfection. And So that's the state that the first moment of creation is a perfect intelligence. And this perfect intelligence, in a way, cools down or makes space for worlds to appear. And one of the worlds is our world. And so we are already a very manifested form in that original divine intelligence. We are appearing in the divine mind right now. And the whole meditative process, the whole contemplative process, actually is our training techniques how to eventually prepare ourselves to pop into this divine realization, which includes the emptiness and the fullness, which includes ever-present witnessing and the whole process of the river of life, changing, moving energy. But one of the principles is that once something has been born, it needs to fulfill its purpose in order to return into peace. And if you look in any of the great traditions, we hear about purpose, we hear about intelligence, and we hear about peace. And peace is not the absence of life, and therefore it's peaceful. It might be in samadhi states, in deep meditative states, but basically it's the peace that is not anymore disturbed by noise. It's not opposed to noise, it's within the noise. It's the peace within the life process of evolution. And so one of the principles is that I live a life that aligns, and my yearning is to devote my life to that greater realization. I devote my life to the fact that I always bow down in front of the greatness of this perfect intelligence, which teaches me humility, which teaches me that there is always more than I can contain in my separate existence. There's always a higher intelligence than my separateness. And so in the moment that this perfect intelligence exhales and I'm already a reduced form that appears in it, I need to bow down in order to receive. And we said, like, in the moment I bow down, with everything that I've learned, that I know, I acknowledge a higher intelligence that I can develop into. And at the same time, I give a chance that within the spaciousness that the bowing movement creates, I'm receiving higher guidance, I'm receiving inspiration, innovation, whatever. And bowing down is not a behavior like that I make myself small, but bowing down is a kind of an attitude of living my life. And in the humility, there is a power, because it means that in the bowing movement, I'm listening moment to moment to moment to that very inner guidance that becomes the GPS of my life. And so the principle is that whenever something has been born, I will participate in life and I will give myself to life, because I know my contract with the divine is to live my life as fully as I can. And so I'm devoting my life to be as honest, as compassionate, as clear, as loving, as embracing, as grounded as I can, because I know the more I participate, the more I express my life energy, moment to moment to moment. And the less there are residues or leftovers that actually reappear again and again as cyclic patterns. And we see this in the big thing, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And we saw this in very small moments when I feel my heart space stays congested. I feel bothered by small situations that I didn't really finish, or where I wasn't fully honest, or where I held back something that needed to be expressed and it bothers me later. So we see the emergence of karma in small little waves, and we see it in big things, in collective traumatizations, through wars, through terrible things that happen in the world. So there is a constant stream of energy that wants to fulfill itself, and if it can, it will become peace. If it cannot, it will create a cycle. So every energy that is not able to fulfill its cycle creates a cycle within the cycle. Thought patterns, emotional patterns, behavior patterns, collective patterns, and so on. And so the impulse that creates us is the very essential creative force that we want to realize again. And it's so close to us that it's deeper than my body, it's deeper than my emotions, it's deeper than my thoughts. It's so intimate in every moment that the realization of it also is the realization that I actually never really was separate from it. But it's so intimate that it's so simple that it's so often overlooked, because all my senses are bound to receive forms, to see forms, and therefore the simplicity of this divine presence that is always here. And we saw it, the first glimpse of it is that I see, wow, the fact that I can watch my body means that I'm not just my body. The fact that I can watch my thoughts means that I'm not just my thoughts. So what actually watches my thoughts? And in the moment I turn my awareness to that which is watching, I start realizing, witnessing consciousness. I establish in myself more of a witnessing awareness of my whole ego structure, and not just of my individual ego structure, of collective ego structures. And suddenly more and more the structures of consciousness appear that we are living through. So another principle that we saw is that always there is a new impulse. When I came into life, I came in as an energy, as a soul, and I started to manifest as my life, as my body, my thoughts, but everything also that I create in the world. And so the new always becomes the fertile ground for the next new impulse. And that's true for lifetimes, but that's also true for example, projects, companies, for everything that we create, art, whatever we do, there is something new that inspires us, and it becomes the fertile ground and the structure of tomorrow. And so always we said that the kingdom of the human being is the translation of energy into structure, of impulses into actions, of new innovations into social structures, individual structures, society systems, technology. And that's the process that we will find again all over. We find it in the macro picture, and we find it in every little moment in our life. Every inspiration becomes the fertile ground for another new inspiration that updates the former one, and that will be updated again. And eventually, this updating process becomes a flow. And we said that everywhere where energy is reduced in its movement, it's actually fixed as a structure that is not easy to change. And we all know in our lives where the structures of life are so fixed or traumatized that it's hard to change because there's so much fear. It's kind of held in contractions. And then the new constantly bumps against the structures that have been fixed. So part of the work, and we saw this in the shadow work module, but also in the innovation module, that is to create more and more fluid structures that we can have fun with, that are functional, but that are subject to change. They can be adapted, that change with our development, individually and collectively, so that I can build a company, I can build a relationship, I can build something, but I can also update it and eventually also let it go in order to create a new one. And so as I witness life, I see suddenly that this process happens all over. It happens in me all the time, and I see it also all around me. But in the moment I align with it, it becomes my power. In the moment I start to listen out of spaciousness, and suddenly I hear more and more insights, more and more inner guidance in me, more and more kind of answers to the questions that I have. I start enjoying this, and the more I enjoy it, I call it even deeper into my life. So that's where I reconnect. We said the spiritual journey is to reconnect to the essence of my experience. And the essence of my experience is usually experienced as light. We saw this in the light meditation. And even if it was hard to connect to light the first time of doing this meditation, I'm sure if you re-listen to it and if you practice it a few times and you listen to the guidance, it will help to open the inner world to receive more and more light and to become more fluid and even translucent inside, so that the light can shine through more. And the more we feel reconnected to that creative light, that is the first spark, appears as the soul. And we talked about that the soul is a kind of an intermediate entity or being in us that reconnects us to the divine. That the more I receive the light directly, I start to establish, in a way, kind of a personal relatedness to the divine. And from that day on, I feel more and more connected, and I feel also more motivated, because there is the experience of the light is nourishing my spiritual drive. It's like the light, connecting to the light and let it flow into my body is like oil into the fire of my spiritual desire. Because it's not only that I believe in something, it's even more than that. It's suddenly I become aware of the nature of higher consciousness. And this higher consciousness infuses itself into my life. So I feel lighter, I feel suddenly more joyful or happy, because the higher vibration, as we said last time, starts to uplift my experience, my bodies, my physical body, my emotional body, my mental body. And I feel literally more connected every moment in my life. And this becomes a resource. So my spiritual fire, my desire that I had, and this was the reason why I started this journey, actually found the oil of its own nourishment. Every time I connect, every time I meditate and I connect to the light enters the lamp in my heart and strengthens it. So even at times when I feel disconnected, the fire in me that wants to awaken is burning. It's burning. It doesn't let me return into sleepiness. It's burning. And I think many of us feel this burning that there is something greater, and it lets us meditate, it lets us practice, it lets us come together like in courses like this. It it lets us study books, practice with each other, or just walk through the forest and feel a deeper connectedness with everything. And so the fire in my heart is being strengthened through reconnecting to the light, and I reconnect to higher and higher levels of light. And if I'm really interested, I will find ways how to deepen it. But with every step that I actually go towards creation, I'm like life gives me presence, and the presence that I get, the gifts that I get, are a lot of insights. So the more I realize the higher levels of consciousness, I get in a way a higher understanding of the world, of everything, because I live in a higher coherence with everything. So more and more of the greater reality starts to become accessible for me, which means I practice literally to like walk back the ladder into that original impulse, where out of nothing something appears and something needs to fulfill its purpose in order to return into nothing. So eventually I can use my lifetime to reconnect into the essence and to reconnect to that place where out of nothing something appears. And in my courses I call this the temple. That's what I call the mystical temple. And the mystical temple is empty and full at the same time. It's before something was born, and it contains everything that's being born moment to moment. But it's that the temple on the mountain that our journey eventually takes us to, where the profound insight of stillness and movement as not two is. And so the principle is that in this journey that we are in, we are somewhere on that Zen circle, and our deeper calling and the fuel that we get through our spiritual practice eventually takes us into the essence of that Zen circle. And we said the Zen circle is open. It's not a closed circle, it's an open circle. And we talked about the fact that through the opening of the circle, the inside and the outside are not separate. And this has a deep spiritual meaning, that my life always needs to create structures that keep the circle open. That I need to give from what I have at least a certain amount in order to keep my energy open, to contribute something to the collective consciousness. The giving is, in a way, the opening of the circle. That from my energy, from my time, from my money, from my knowledge, from whatever the gifts that I have to offer, some of it will be offered to the collective as a donation, as a voluntary contribution, because this keeps my energy open, which keeps the whole system intelligent, because the outside is not separate from the inside. The intelligence can flow through all of us. And we said in the Kabbalistic mysticism that the giving is actually the becoming equal to the divine force, which is an overflowing power, and that my giving actually reconnects me to the collective, but also balances something in the collective so that the whole system becomes, in a way, wealthy. And so the openness of the sense circle can be represented in how I run my company, how I live my life with the natural resources that I have, with the intellectual resources that I have, with the emotional resources that I have. So on every level, there is actually the possibility to keep the sense circle open. And in that process, I'll, in a way, become like a cottage on the mountain. Let's say when all of us have a cottage on the mountain somewhere on different heights, and we said that when the water comes down the mountain, when life flows through all of us, the one aspect of me is continuously learning from life, because I know that I need to bow down in order to receive life, to receive teaching, to receive my inner guidance, to receive higher knowledge in every dimension. It doesn't matter what I study, I can always learn more, which means the water that comes from the mountain can enter my cottage, as we said, and once it flows through my cottage, I will not keep it just for me. I will pass it on wherever I can pass it on. And so whatever life gives me as a gift of knowledge, I pass it on to wherever I feel called to pass it on, so that the water can actually exit my cottage. And because it is allowed to exit, and it's allowed to exit to other cottages, the whole mountain has enough water. The whole mountain has enough water to create nature, to create abundance, to be green, to be rich. So there is literally and metaphorically an effect when we stop the water flow, because some part of the land will dry out. So if I'm not able to learn because I'm not able to bow down, and if I keep what I learn for myself and I don't pass it on, I didn't understand the nature of energy. Because we said once something is born, it's movement. Energy is movement. And energy cannot be kept. No one of us can keep energy like in a bank account. Energy needs to move. That's its nature. And intelligence moves because it's movement. So all I can do, I can participate in the movement that there is anyway. And by participating in the movement, I get recharged. We said, okay, what recharges you in life? Participation in the movement is recharging me. That's when my batteries get charged. And we feel it as flow. So we said that whenever I allow as much energy to run through me as I can, first of all, I will be recharged, but I participate in a healthy system. Because I don't stop the water from coming to me, and I don't stop the water from being passed on. So literally, I participate in the movement that I anyway am. And this creates healthy systems. This creates healthy relationships. This creates healthy business structures. This creates healthy society structures. This creates health in my own system. And the flow that I become means that less and less energy stays stuck in me, which has side effects, and we said which is equals karma. So that when I need to deal with the side effects, I'm not fully present with the current moment. If I'm fully present with the current moment, I'm dealing less with the side effects, so I see life clearer. So the part of the principle is that movement cannot be kept, cannot be owned. And that's so hard for the ego because the ego constantly wants to have something. But then suddenly I see I cannot even have something. Yeah, I can have temporarily, I can own properties or money or whatever, but eventually it needs to be rechanneled back into the big stream of movement in order to be part of a healthy system. And so the nature of energy is movement, and well-being and happiness comes from participating in the original movement. And if I participate in the original movement, I create a coherence. Like my inner world, like the sense circle, the outer world and the inner world are not separate. And so the rising coherence in the flow state, and some of the great sports people describe this when they are in the zone, like in a deep like state of being in a flow state, in a sports competition, for example. So suddenly it feels like life moves through me and there is a higher intelligence, but I am not there anymore as a separate person. I'm just part of a movement. And then the greatest things are possible. And we hear it in descriptions of some sports people, we hear it in descriptions of artists, we hear it in descriptions of saints and sages, that there is this merging between the inside and the outside, and suddenly there's this greater awareness. And so within that greater coherence between inside and outside, one could even say what we already said in another module, that it's similar like when the moon reflects itself in the pond in the night in a still water. So when the water is not still and it's moving a lot, so the mirror image of the moon in the water is disturbed. But if the moon is reflected clearly, it looks very real. It looks like this could be the moon. And so in communication, we said the more, the clearer and open and participating I am in life, the more you arise in me in the clearest version possible. That creates understanding and that creates love. So when many people talk about unconditional love, it means there's nothing in between. Unconditional love means that the moon looks very real in the water, that you look very real in me, and I look very, very real in you. So that my inner world and the openness and the plasticity and the inner plasticity is a kind of fluidity to have the world received inside in such a clear way that there is one result of it is understanding, compassion, love, coherence, not feeling separate. And so in communication, my aim is like when we said it, I think last time also, the conductor that conducts the philharmony, and what makes a world-class conductor is that the conductor has the orchestra inside. The conductor hears out of many instruments that one instrument is not fully in tune. This tone was half a tone too low or too high, and which I, for example, sitting in the philharmony wouldn't even hear. The conductor says, no, that's not okay. So there is an excellence in the the communication process as well, that we suddenly hear the fine tones of a human being, which when a human being is not a fixed thing, but an orchestra of levels of consciousness, an orchestra of different qualities of being a human being. And suddenly there is this amazing symphony. And when we hear an amazing symphony, we get goosebumps. Why? Because of the high level of coherence, that all the instruments are so synchronized that it creates something higher than many instruments playing together. And which means for us that my spiritual practice is again and again and again throwing myself into the river of life and being more and more able to really contain the world within myself and to see where it's hard for me to let the process of life move through me and to give it attention. We had enough like exploration of what is possible to do in order to release shadows, to integrate shadows, because I know from now on that shadows are actually recurrent energy patterns that will come back again and again and again until they find its own purpose, because energy needs to fulfill itself. And so when I align with the original flow, I create coherence. And in some tradition, we called the non-alignment with that original flow a sin. But a sin has been a little bit misinterpreted sometimes, and it's the whole guilt story has been wrapped around it. And so it has been removed a little bit out of its original meaning. But in the moment I'm not in alignment, where I say things that are actually too much or too little, I feel its effect. I feel the tension in my body, I feel the tension in my emotions, I feel the tensions in my thoughts or with my inner alignment. I feel something is not fully on right now. And so the correction of this feeling is coming back to alignment. And that's what for example, in Christianity, that's what the original meaning of a sin is. It's feeling that I'm getting out of alignment and that I feel I'm getting back into alignment. When we take off all the guilt story in the first place and we just stay with the energetics, it's when I'm not living a mindful life. So I will suddenly say things, and suddenly I feel, but I'm talking too much, and I didn't even pay attention that I talk too much, or I'm not saying the truth, or I'm holding back things, and I feel the side effects of it. I feel the immediate karma, if you want to use this word, the immediate side effect in my whole open system. And the more I'm developing myself, the more my subtle competencies are growing, the more I refine my inner energy states, I will feel it more and more, and I will also hear it around me more and more. And therefore, it means that I'm continuously learning. I'm continuously learning to realign life through my life, and that I'm more in tune and more in tune and more in tune moment to moment. And I think that's an exciting journey. And finally, understanding energy also means that I need to give up on the notion of a fixed paradise. That I need to give up on the notion of something being static in the universe. Like I will practice hard and then finally I will arrive in the state, or I will arrive in the paradise, and then I can let go. So being energy, being the movement of life, and being stillness, when stillness is not separate from the movement of life, means that there is no end, same as there was never a beginning. And then I see, wow, wait a moment, my own mortality I project onto the spiritual journey. And I even project it onto God. Because then there must be an end to the journey. There must be an end, like there's eventually an end to my life. I see it already projected, like the end of my life. The end of my life is already projected onto my spiritual journey because there must be an end to it. But in the assumption of this end, I'll actually keep myself separate from the ever-changing isness of reality. So when I drop that notion that there must be an end, what am I waiting for? What am I projecting into the future as the end of my spiritual journey? That the next moment must be the one where I awaken. Tomorrow, when I practiced enough, when whatever, then is the moment that I awaken. And that's the prescription of staying asleep. Because whenever I wait for the next moment, I'm already premeditating the future, and I won't find it here. Which actually throws me back to the start, which means it throws me back into the radicality of this very given moment. So if there is no end that I'm waiting for, and it's not life and death, not the changing of life and death, not that after my life there is a death which is ending my life, but actually after my life there is death which is also life, and there is no end to the journey. Then suddenly I'm reflected back very radically onto the intensity of now. And that's a now where I suddenly look through. I look through this given moment. I look through the illusion of being separate from that moment. And I also look through the illusion that in the next moment it's gonna get better. And this creates a radical presence and more of a wakefulness here. So within understanding more and more the cycle of life, which seems to be movement, I realize the intensity of like the inside and the outside of the circle, which is space. The radicality of the space that allows the circle to appear. So the isness, the presence, the ever-present awareness, and the ever-changing cycles of life. And as a cycle of life, I realize suddenly the radicality of the isnness, the space in between the letters and the space in between the cycles, the outside and the inside, is enlightenment, is awakening, is radically here. So in order to read a letter, to read a story, and one of the stories is the story of my life, I need to look at paper, or I need to look at the background that gives the letters space to appear, that gives the circle space to appear. And so if I don't use my mind to project myself into the next moment, I'm looking at you, and you're looking at me. And we are not dreaming of something else, so we are really here. And let's take this now into a short reflection of just to see how you feel. I mean, I said many things right now, and and of course they contain a kind of an intellectual content, and at the same time they are kind of signposts towards like a very strong moment-to-moment presence that takes away the, in a way, illusion to get somewhere. And of course, there is development, and we said energy is developing and the world's developing, and at the same time, it's ever present and still and always already here. And so, eventually, throughout my spiritual practice, I'll become the host of this paradox. That of course I'm evolving, and I know that I'm evolving, and I will continue to evolve eternally, and at the same time I'm always already here. And in the moment I'm a host to this paradox, as I learned throughout my journey to become a host to every tension that appears in my life, so that every tension that appeared in my life was a small answer to my life's question. And by hosting it and dedicating my presence and my feeling awareness to it, eventually the tension turns into evolution. And so in this last module of this course, I'm very much interested now how all the modules that we went through, what are the essential three, let's call it the essential three aspects of the modules that we looked at, being it transparent communication, the shadow work, the inspiration, and receiving the future, the higher we aspects, the challenges of a modern world, the meditation practices, contemplation and prayer, and also like the deeper studying of principles, like some of the principles, and there are many more that I described now. But given our time, and that we want to have also time to for Q&A time, the three essential things that you find for you that you can take with you from that course for now. And I'm sure when you will re-listen to different modules that you will hear new things. And therefore the course is not just over, the course in a way we could say has never begun and never ended, because if it's true timeless wisdom that we look at here, the content is actually open, which means every time we listen to it, we will hear new things. Even if our mind knows we listened to it already and we know what we talked about. But the essence of the mystical knowledge is that it's always full of possibilities. So the letters of a sacred text are open, and therefore they transmit consciousness states, but also the letter of a sacred text is never closed. A letter of a regular book is usually closed to a certain degree, but sacred texts, that's what makes them sacred, means that the letters are open, they are breathing. So they're breathing possibilities. And so my mind can fix it to my current understanding, but every time I come back, I will see new nuances that I didn't see before, didn't hear before. And that's the beauty of studying mystical studies. So the more I immerse myself, the more it shows me. And that's a beautiful cycle. So for the time being, for the current time, what are the three major signposts or the three major aspects that you take from this course that you know, wow, that's cool to apply in my life. That's great because this is really important in my life to develop forward, to give time to it, to practice more, and that spoke to you the most. The three aspects that spoke to you the most, the three practices that you think are the most important. Whatever you hear right now, I would love to do a short triad, and then we have some Q&A time, and then we summarize our journey. Michelle, do you want to give any instructions?
Sure, so just a reminder, please press 2 if for some reason you're not able to join in the groups here. And those from the video, this is time to come on over. You can join us as well. So press 2 if you need to opt out, and please come on over from this video. Back to you, Thomas.
Great. So again, the instruction in 3 minutes to bring in the three most important practices, the most important aspects of this teaching, or you can also bring in some of the insights that you already had through the practices here. And again, like in the mystical dialogue, the listening, the attunement, and what we call the reading in the book of life. So when I listen to you and I attune with your life and your world, so I'm literally learning through your practice something about my own practice, and that the other two who are listening are using the time to tune in and to see what do I actually learn from your practice, because we are digging together and we are finding a sunken city in the sand together. And so your insights might inspire me to have my own insights and vice versa. And then we get together for Q&A time. Great. So let's start. Yeah, let's jump right into a Q&A time, and then at the end we will wrap up our course and summarize what we did together. But let's take some time to see what are questions that are in the field or statements. And Michelle, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a reminder to press 1. I talk with Thomas. I'll keep an eye on the video. And just to answer a quick question that was on the video, yes, absolutely, you will be able to access all the materials after the course. On the homepage, all of that information will be available to you. So more details about that will be in your completion email, so please do read that as to what you can access, for how long, all of that. But yes, you'll have plenty of time to access all of those for a year, and then if at any point if you want to download them, you have them for life. So all of it's available to you. All right, let's see, someone who called in. Let's go with Marcus. There we go. Marcus, you're live.
Okay, hi Thomas, thank you.
Hello, Marcus.
Yeah, my question is now, I had originally another one in regards to the meditation, but I think this is more in the foreground now from what you said towards the end about, the idea of a specific goal or a fixed goal, heaven or something, actually standing in the way. And I really connect to that very much. And yet, I wonder about the fact that it seems that so many teachings have at least been understood to have that, Christianity or Buddhism about the breaking of the cycle of birth and death, the end of pain. And I feel often the more intense, even now, teachers as so they have something like that, or at least it's understood like that. And in fact, myself, I also find this tension between, because originally there is this longing for this, some kind of a final resting, some kind of a final sinking into the absolute, that feels like a fixed goal in some sense. and yet I connect so strongly with, I know in my life it has actually kept me from a deeper presence. In the moment in the beginning, my spiritual path was more, trying to get the hell out of here in a sense.
Right.
And so I see both. Yeah. So I see both, and I just wonder if you can say anything more about that.
Yeah, I think you put it beautifully with this one sentence, to get the hell out of here. I think that's exactly what it plays into. Of course, there is like illumination and enlightenment and awakening, however we call it. But in our minds, it can become actually one of the biggest obstacles. And so we always look in the spiritual path at what is actually the image that I hold about it in my mind, and what's the actuality of what it is. And so, yes, of course, many teachings talk about like an enlightenment state, but actually this state is not something fixed. But in our minds, it can become something fixed, like the final sofa. It's the white sofa at the end of the tunnel, and I do everything. I practice hard. I give all that I have, but eventually it takes me to that sofa, and then I can rest, and then I'm done with it. And so the first thing is that what it describes is not that. And the second thing is that in our nature as human beings, very often we are trained to avoid pain. We are trained to avoid challenges. And it's a welcomed food for our mind to find the perfect exit, because now it's the ultimate exit. It's enlightenment, it's the paradise, it's the sofa at the end of the tunnel. So that's the only, in a way, permitted exit, it seems, because it's something to do with the divine. And then that's the reason how I can avoid the intensity of the current moment. And so conceptually, of course, it's true, but at the end, the concept that we hold about it is not true. And that makes it a paradox. It's, yes, there is an enlightenment state, but the state is not fixed. It's not static. It's realizing the ever-changing nature of life and the ever-present nature of life. And in the mind, in the separate mind, it becomes an image of a state which is static, and therefore it's in the way. And I believe in every great tradition, yes, there is the description of that, but in the radical teachings, we get ripped off this image. Like in the radical practice of Christianity and Buddhism and so, we actually need to let go of it in order to become it. Even if conceptually it's a true teaching, of course, that Buddha mind or the Buddha state or however we call it is truly the realization. But this realization is not a something. This realization is the realization of ever-presence and ever-changing reality. So that's, I think, what I have to say to it. That and that in the practice, I need to be very honest with myself where I fall prey to the laziness to be here, or the laziness to relate. So that I'll fix you after I know you, I'll fix you into an image, and then that's who you are in my mind. Or I truly meet you again and again and again and again and again. However often I met you, it's a fresh moment, it's a fresh attunement, it's a fresh finding out who you are right now. And that's the practice of my love. That's how I love you, by meeting you radically new every time I meet you again. So I think that's the avoidance of life can be like a big temptation when we look at the paradise at the end of the tunnel. So these are a few reflections on it, but if you have something more, please let me know.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I guess the only other thing that comes to my what I'm feeling right now is really about the honesty with myself about where these concepts are the helpful understanding in a way. And I notice with some friends that sometimes the opposite concept seems to be able to stand in the way as well. When we say, okay, well, the problem is the seeking, the problem is the it's all here, and then you kind of come to this conclusion that, well, I'm already here, it's all already there, and so I don't have to do anything, and I stop searching. And seems to be another place that I've
Totally, and that's also what
wanting to fall into.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't. Do you want to end your sentence? I didn't hear that you were still speaking.
Yes, I was complete. Thank you. Yes.
That my criticism on some of the non-dual Advaita teachings is exactly that it becomes a concept that we are already here, and then we are not respecting the ever-changing or evolving or the development of life and energy needs to be respected equally. So, and that's nothing that I can grasp with my mind. There's no way of grasping both with my limited mind. This explodes my mind. How can it be that that life's developing in me and through me, and at the same time I'm always already here? This doesn't fit together in the thinking. And I'm also often very critical of teachings that just convey a concept of everything's already and just the seeking is the problem. Because I agree with you that this also can become a concept, and then we become too passive, and we are actually we're creating a friction with our life energy, and then actually frustration or even sometimes depression is an effect of it, because we are not anymore participating fully. Even the misunderstanding of Wu Wei Wu in the Tao Te Ching, which means non-action. But non-action doesn't mean that I'm not doing anything anymore. Non-action means that I'm neither pushing nor resisting life. But if an action naturally arises as an impulse, of course, that's what I do, because preventing this action from happening is also a doing. So sometimes the non-action gets translated into, oh, we are not anymore doing so much in the world, we are just here. But that's, I think, a misunderstanding of the original teaching of the Tao Te Ching. And so not to become too passive through, oh, everything's already here, means I'm not participating anymore in the river of life, which creates side effects. And because it's so hard to grasp with our minds, the only way to really embody it is to constantly practice it. And that's the only way how I'll understand, but I will not understand like when you drive with your car and you're driving on the highway and you're driving fast, and then you see the signs that show you the speed limits and whatever is happening on the street and the construction sites. So every time I fix reality, it's like one of the signs, and when I drive fast, they flip by very quickly. But they are fixed signs, they are not reality itself. And so whenever the street is constantly moving, there's a constant movement in the driving. And so I can see certain concepts, but they are true only for the current moment. And then I'll find out again, and then I'll find out again, and I'll find out again. So that's how I stay true to the movement, but in the present moment. And that's so hard because no concept will ever explain reality to me. There is no such a thing, and I think we can be very happy that there is not, because otherwise we would create a closed system. Yeah. So maybe that's it for this question for now. That's another person can ask. And thank you. It's a very important question. There's so much more to say.
Okay, so let's go to someone who called in on the general pin, area code 808. Please share your name.
This is Anne.
Hello.
Hi, Anne.
Hello, Thomas. That was such a rich teaching today. I thank you so much. So in the last week in the meditation that you did with the light, that was really powerful for me, and I actually saw the gravity pulling up. I actually had an experience of that light and that coming into my body. And in the triad, I spoke about that and told a story of something that happened, which I'd like to share. I'll be as brief as I can, but and then there's a question around it. About maybe 15 years ago, my parents were killed in a car accident together. And it was obviously epic and tragic and a shock to my community. But about 5 days after, I just sat down. So I'm about 42 years old at this time, so in the context of my life, I sat down and it's like, okay, where are you guys? Everything I've ever learned in my life, what's going on? Where are you? What happened? And instantaneously, I had an inner vision of them as light bodies. They were about maybe 10 feet in front of me, and they're quite tall. Two sort of separate energies, a lot of energy around the heart area, and then long. And it was like their essence without the impediments of their being. It was obvious to me it was them. And then the thing happened where there's energy in that heart that's almost like it was swirling. Their two streams came together and it went into me. And I just felt like it was a great gift. I felt like it was some kind of inheritance from my family. It was, for like a month after that, I felt like I was in a state of grace. I could feel and sense energy, the energy fields of whatever I was around. It was really amazing. Of course, my friends told me I was in shock, but I was, Anyway, I had this profound experience. So I described this to my triad mates, and one of the women said, that's the we space. You're describing energetically how we're connected. And I was like, wow, I really want to ask Thomas about that. So that's one question. Is that like a template of what is actually happening energetically? That's one question. And then the other question is just all along this course, that experience of death and relating to death, and like in my own life, dealing with a cancer diagnosis, and I have had to face my own potential death. It's been the most powerful lessons to actually have an amazing life. I mean, it was, I can't, you can't imagine losing your parents, but at the same time, I was given a gift of equal magnificence to balance that. So anyway, I guess my question, I have two questions. One is that image that I saw and the movement of that energy actually a template to explore the mystical, energetic aspect of what's actually happening? And also, I'm wondering if you could just speak more about that edge of life and death and how that relates to our process.
So first of all, to the first question, yes, on the one hand, when we study mystical studies, we of course also study what actually happens when we leave the physical body, and there are different stages of how we shed energy layers. And so once we drop the physical body and the etheric body dissolves, we are in a way thrown into like the whole energetic world, but in the whole energetic world, the creation of our thought process is like in the dream world, immediate. So whatever we think, whatever we feel, it becomes very real. And so the more I'm identified with my whole energetic system, I will stay identified in the process of this energetic world as well. So my dissolving process will take actually longer and will be a kind of a it will feel like a long experience. But what I want to say with this is that whenever we have a certain energetic capacity, and it seems like in your case, when you ask this question, you opened yourself to that energetic world or astral world or however we call that. And within that world, the same as we are aware of dreams while we are in this physical body, we can, what you did, also be aware of that energetic world. And so if people open this and train it, so then this capacity gets stronger and stronger. And then there are actually people who work with people that experience the leaving of the physical body with through shock or through trauma or whatever. And we can work on that dissolving of the trauma equally as we work with traumatized people here. And so there is definitely in us the potential to relate to a certain energetic state that the soul is in without a physical body. And as long as this dissolving process lasts, we have actually access to that, and it appears in us, for example, as entities, as energy fields, as very concrete forms. But the form is again something that this energy, how this energy appears in us, that's a way how we see it and how we are able to relate to it, how we understand the language basically of that experience. But that's happening in us. That's our experience of it. But there is also an energy that we experience. And so if that's the experience in your case, that's a very valid experience. And I think even that's an experience that we can train and open ourselves to more, so it becomes more and more precise. And the other question is that I think, and that's also what we also do in a certain way already in our trainings, and what I'm planning on doing more also, is that I would love to really look at what are the mystical principles and the mystical practices around leaving our physical body, what we have to practice in order to go through this transition in the most conscious way, and even to find, like, to meet that experience with the highest curiosity possible, so that the same, in a way, the same life experience than any other experience in my life, and that I'll find a curiosity to explore it really and fully and wholeheartedly, and therefore to stay awake as much as we can, as much as we practice in this lifetime, to be in the wakefulness, like as if we go through a dream, but we know that we are in a dream, this kind of thing, and to stay awake because I'm awake to the ultimate ground of being. So that's just something that I witness equally, but there is a consciousness that is unbroken through the whole process. And I think that's a very exciting and very like a really amazing process and practice. And it's something that I believe is so necessary to that the energetics and the mystical contents will be vivid and alive for us in it. And then I think it can be an amazing impact also onto our culture while we are alive, because it will, and it's not taking away the fears, but we are meeting our fears, and therefore we can dedicate ourselves even more to that process. So that the reincarnation theory is not a bypass to our existential fears, but it's actually a motivation to look at them deeper and to transform them, because we cannot bypass them, but we can transform them. And some people, as you said, when we are confronted with this reality in our life, we actually become very radical within life. If you really meet those fears, we become very radical in life, and that's actually a way like how awakening also works. So that's a beautiful, I think it's a very beautiful process. I hope this answers your question, and I'm sorry that our line dropped in the middle, but I hope it anyway delivered it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that I have found in you a teacher who I can share these things with and help me to integrate it and deepen it. So thank you.
So thank you. So that
I could go on and on, but I won't. I won't now. Next class.
Right. Yeah, me too. I could go on and on, but we won't. Maybe in the next class. Right.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Yeah, great. So we discovered another amazing topic that we could look at. But given our time, I think I would love to dedicate the last part of this call to sum up what we did, and also to create a vision of that I think in this course we covered really essential in the modules, topics and practices that all together can create a very coherent path in our awakening process. And so if I take into account that the relational aspects that we learn through transparent communication are crucial, and if I deepen them and practice them, and we had a lot of references throughout the course around according to the transparent communication, so that's something that helps me incredibly in relational spaces and in communication, but also gives me a time to practice while I am relating. It's my spiritual practice in the marketplace. The shadow work is incredibly important because it helps me to de-ice and to melt the frozen aspects in myself and the fixed aspects in myself, in order to be more and more fluid and open and clear and, of course, mature, like grown up. And the inspiration from the higher consciousness and the light meditation, if I practice this regularly, my inspiration will get stronger and my inner connectedness. And so my guidance, any kind of spiritual practice, is designed to reflect me back to my own guidance, to my own relation with the divine. And so that's continuing the drive of my journey and the teaching, the inner teaching. And then for the further practice, I would definitely see if in some way you found peers or practitioner partners or interesting people for you in the community, or you have them already in your own community, so that the we spaces and to have a field is incredibly important, I believe, for many people, because the cultural field and the mainstream value systems are, as we know, not always in sync with the mystical principles. And so in order to create a coherent field of practice that nourishes itself, it's so vital to have people to practice with. I think that's a very strong strengthening aspect of one's own practice. And through the dialogue and relating my own insights to the world, I can learn a lot, and I can also see where I'm living in my own illusion. So the friction with the world, the creativity that comes out, and the natural confrontation are key, I believe, in my own growth process. And I highly recommend to have a long-term friendship with meditation, contemplation, and prayer, because those are the practices that really push our evolution forward in the transpersonal dimension, in the higher consciousness dimensions. And I believe sooner or later we will discover as humanity that these practices are vital to live a coherent and connected and a life that digests life itself. And when we take all of this together, so I believe in the course package that is available to everybody, we have modules that we can revisit, and at times one of them will be more important and I can re-listen to it. And if I have difficulties in my life in a certain area, I can see, okay, what will support me the most. And I'm sure many of us know this effect that when we revisit a book or when we revisit certain teachings, we hear suddenly different things because we are in a different state. We are in a different state of our own development. But also, if it's an open material, it will show me continuously new aspects. And so I believe the course is not really over. It's just the beginning. So we downloaded like the course material, but now the live practice, and I think we have practices for many aspects of a holistic or integral practice, starts, and the embodiment of the course starts. And I think that's the exciting thing, because that's what I do moment to moment, is to embody whatever I learn, and by embodying it, it becomes my life. And then there is a coherence between what I say, how I live, how I act, how I love. And I think that's the beauty of the spiritual practice, the insight and the embodiment of the insight. And finally, first of all, I would love to thank everybody in our team, also the senior students and their love to support those groups and the triads and the mentoring calls. So thank you very much to all our team, senior students. And also thank you very much to Michelle and Jeffrey mainly, and everybody who supported here and there from the Shift Network. And the Shift Network as a whole, because I think this is the platform that enables us to have dialogues and explorations like that. And it's an amazing possibility, an opportunity of our time, except some of the phone lines that drop sometimes. But our technology enables us to have this kind of virtual intimacy, and that we fill virtual spaces with conscious awareness, with feeling awareness, with love, and with meaning. And I think that's the great blessing that we can bring into this very fast technological advancement. And yeah, so I thank you everyone for the shared space, the intimacy, and the trust, and the beauty of the mutual exploration, and the gifts that life receives from it through all of us. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Maybe Michelle, you want to add some practical details at the end?
Sure. So, yes, again, deep gratitude to you, Thomas, and this beautiful teaching. I've never get tired of hearing it, and I do get it deeper and deeper every single time. And for all of you, I do encourage you with your practice groups to keep going and keep supporting each other. If some members of your group are not wanting to continue, feel free to reach out in the Facebook community group. Facebook community group and the course homepage, like I shared earlier, are available for the next year to support you. And with any of the materials on the homepage, you can download them at any time, and then they're yours for life. So please utilize those resources, continue to support each other. And I will send out a final email with some final listening practices. Thank you again for your time, and we will keep you posted on new courses with Thomas that will be coming up potentially in the fall as soon as they start to unfold. And thank you again to everybody, your students, Jeffrey, and all who supported us here today and throughout the entire course.